Hi. Today, I wanted to talk to you not about any specific card game or any product, but about the entire TCG market in the context of the collectibles market from a financial perspective. And when I think about how I perceived it, and also consider what its most important and defining key feature is at this particular moment in time, which, at least in my opinion, actually generates some really interesting and unique kinds of opportunities, not only for people who are passionate about this field, but also for individuals such as collectors and investors who might be looking for new possibilities or avenues to explore. So generally, when it comes to the TCG market, in the sense that these are things that have value, this value changes over time and you can trade them. Well, I personally found out very quickly because I was already playing Magic when I was 10 or 11 years old. And even back then, it was known that some cards cost a different amount than other cards. Boosters had a certain price, and they also cost a different price in the store than they did on the internet. And that, of course, influenced the whole system of such behaviors. Consumer behaviors, and market reactions. And that's even in such a micro world, because as, I don't know, an 11 or 12-year-old, from the very beginning, I had such an approach to my own finances, and I know that many of my other friends from the card world still practice the principle of letting the hobby finance your hobby. You want to play cards, have decks, meet up with friends, play drafts? Well, those are expensive things. Sure, if someone, I don't know, was born into a very, very wealthy family and has money like ice, then sure, then maybe they shouldn't worry about it. And if someone is a tourist in the hobby for a moment, then again, they can set aside some budget and everything's great. If someone wants to be in this hobby for a longer time and thinks about it seriously, it's good to approach the issue of finances sensibly, because a hobby can cost trips to events, accommodation, cards. It all adds up to a lot. So where could you actually look for that money from the very beginning? It was mainly trading singles. Most people who frequently attended tournaments, the store, or some events with friends had, I don't know, one binder. In that binder, they had cards. And if, for example, I had some spare cash and I saw that someone was selling off their collection, that collection was often, I don't know, 8 or 10 more expensive cards. Well, then it was known that if, for example, a card costs $10 and I buy it for 7 and put it in a binder, then sooner or later someone will buy it from me for those $9 or $10. And if it's a good card, maybe its price will even go up. So my waiting will work in my favor. And I very quickly noticed that this whole thing about waiting in sales working to your advantage doesn't just apply to singles. Besides, everything with singles just went south because, Wizards started reprinting everything with those massive secret layers, so it stopped making sense for singles, but it started making more and more sense for sealed product. And especially for sealed product that's already going out of circulation. Because really, as I often mention here on the channel, the market for a specific product, what's happened, what's happening, and what will happen, needs to be looked at in two distinct periods, being in active print or being out of print already. If an item is in active print, well, its price can sometimes be a total roller coaster. Just look at what happened recently with One Piece, for example. OP03, EB03, before anyone even opened the box, just one announcement about reprints, no one knew how many or where, just what, and the price just tanks. It drops because the anomaly of this market is that it's very, very shallow. Shallow, though that doesn't mean it's some niche game. I mean, they print billions of Pokemon cards, probably Magic too, and on top of that, we have a whole bunch of other card games waiting in line that also churn out plenty of cardboard. So the market itself is large, but it's shallow. And while it's not entirely shallow, or at least you have to be careful with products in active print, like those who bought OP03 assuming that, oh, OP already messed up the product by reprinting last time, so they won't keep reprinting it. Well, buying OP03 at the peak wasn't exactly the smartest move, precisely because that item is still in active print. And you can get some really big, weird anomalies during that period. Take Pokemon, for example. The fact that the Surging Sparks booster box, from what I think is a brilliant expansion in terms of, well, everything, chase cards, set identity, the look of the box. Everything about it was spot on. It's currently cheaper than, I don't know, Obsidian Flames or Scarlet and Violet base boxes. Well, here it's purely a matter of surging sparks just being hammered into the market, being supplied in absolutely massive quantities. And in that initial period, it's really hard to fully predict what might happen with the boxes. However, once a box is out of active print, it's basically in the hands of the secondary market. I didn't catch this anomaly fast enough because in Magic, which I've been involved with for most of my years, it was often distorted by the fact that Wizards kept large amounts of sealed product for future Grand Prix events and so on. I was at a Grand Prix in Krakow myself, for example. It was back in 2004 or 5 or 2014, 2015, and it turned out Wizards brought an absolutely insane amount of Rise of Eldrazi boxes to that Grand Prix. Basically, you could do drafts for 10 euros, you could buy boxes of it, get them as prizes and ticks, and it turned out that suddenly huge amounts of Rise of Eldrazi appeared, and boxes that were, I don't know, $1,000 just dropped to 500, 600, because it turned out there was still plenty of it, and Wizards could dump it at any moment. That was an anomaly. First of all, Grand Prix are gone. Even the last ones didn't look like that anymore. And I think that's mainly why new, fresh products from active print runs started appearing there. And this anomaly regarding the shallowness of movement in the sealed product market outside of active print runs started becoming more and more visible. So visible that I personally decided to get much more involved in cards, precisely because the shallowness of this secondary market creates very big opportunities. Opportunities that wouldn't be possible in other markets. I was always a bit interested. I was never an expert, a financial advisor or anything like that. But since I reached adulthood, I tried to remember to invest a small part of my income, invest in funds. I learned how the stock market works, what various financial instruments are, less or more risky ones, cryptocurrencies, commodities, gold. Well, in none of those markets is there practically this kind of shallowness, because too much copper is, I don't know, traded. Too much wheat is traded for any single operation to strongly affect the price of a given commodity, like a buyout. And also, often on the stock market, for example in banks, it's not possible because people involved in a certain type of asset can't, I don't know, bet on the price of those assets. But with cards, it's the complete opposite. We have a shallow market where in secondary circulation, there are, for example, 120 boxes of something, and it might turn out that a coordinated action by 2 or 3, not even big funds, but shops or traders, can cause the price to jump by 300 or 400%, creating total anomalies. We've all heard about Kabuto King and how he drove up the price of Kabuto, but we also have to remember that the shallowness of this market has its pros and cons. The fact that the price can be driven up very easily means it can also be driven down just as easily. Take Kaladesh, for example. When Wizards announced that the name was no longer politically correct and they wouldn't use it anymore, there was a massive buyout of Kaladesh boxes. But it turned out that so many people rightly noticed that Kaladesh is a unique expansion because of the availability of masterpieces. It's like a Pokemon-style expansion for Magic. People were holding huge amounts of boxes in their closets, and it turned out they emptied those boxes out. Those boxes flooded the market. The price collapsed, dropping from $1,000 down to, I don't know, $500 or $600. So playing around in the secondary market is very dangerous. You don't know what someone's holding in their closet and might pull out. You don't know when a dealer might need product and suddenly dump it. Maybe Kabuto King will have to sell all his Kabuto cards, and suddenly it turns out that those buying now at an absolute peak generated by speculation and buyouts could see it all fall apart from the other side. Opportunities also arise. When we realized, for example, how relatively few Rift-bound boxes were opened, and what rare cards could be found in them, how few were opened in, say, Europe or the States, and how few are on the market. And considering what a brand League of Legends and Riot are, you could start asking yourself what that might mean. But today wasn't supposed to be about specific products or specific releases or card games, but more about this phenomenon that I strongly encourage you to pay attention to. This market is shallow, and that has its pros and cons. And above all, We all have to remember that, to be careful and simply not get burned.